TALON.
Lawnmower.
The lawnmower blades are gonna be sharpened. The deck's gonna be raised, and it's gonna be on the pipe. What was that noise?
All right, guys, so as you see in that last clip, you probably heard some pretty spicy noises coming from the back of the lawnmower. We believe it is the wheel side axles. If you guys have been following along, you know we've had like kind of a rear axle debacle going on. I don't even know if that's the right word, but I used it. And today we're here to hopefully fix that. And among that, but a couple other things as well, which I'll get into right now. Before I throw this thing on the lift, I wanted to measure ground clearance. So we got Josh over here, wrench on the turbo S. Never ending. Whether or not the turbo S video went before this one or after this one, I don't know, but go check it out if you're curious what happened to that thing, if you haven't already seen it.
All right, time to do ground clearance. What's it at, Justin? Low.
Currently, the mower deck is set at 14.5 in the rear. The rear is not exactly the issue. It seems like it's raked down a bit in the front, which makes sense because the last time we set the ground clearance on the front was when we rebuilt the whole front end and everything was super tight and, you know, all new, sucked together. So it's definitely worn in. Plus it's got a cage on and stuff now. So it seems like the front end sank quite a bit. So we're definitely gonna get that bumped up. It's on the to-do list because I think we're pretty low down here. So at the lowest point,
It's a low rider.
at the lowest point, the deck height is 11.5 inches.
That's not good for the lawn, folks. 11 in the front and 14 in the rear. That just does not give you an even cut.
No, I mean, you're gonna be scalping it in the front and then, I guess, business in the front, party in the back. The mower just wants to party. So before I throw it on the lift, I just want to measure ground clearance. We are gonna raise it. I haven't picked a number yet, so we'll talk about that when we get to raising it up.
How much of a brick does it want to ride like? A brick.
Alright, so I just want to give a shout out to Powersports Nation for hooking us up with a set of OEM used axles. We tried the Rhino 2.0s, as you guys seen, the SuperATV stuff, broke one right away. I believe it's all just coming down to not having the sway bar on at that point. So unfortunately, we are going back with a sway bar on this thing. But Powersports Nation came through again. They sell used quality ATV, UTV parts, and they actually come with a 30 to 60 day warranty on the used parts, which is pretty crazy. So obviously not the wear items, but just to make sure that when you put the part in, it came out of a salvaged rig, obviously, that it is good. So that's super cool. They do rebuild for engines and everything, so they'll get engines, rebuild them, and then sell them on their site. So they got everything major to minor, they got it all. So super cool company. Basically, if you're looking for used parts, instead of hitting up eBay or something like that, support that business, and they've probably got what you need. They got a lot of inventory. So, but yeah, that's one of the things we're doing on this thing is putting the sway bar back on. This has been off since the very first time we rode it at the cliffs, and I think that is the root of all of our issues with the rear axles. So unfortunately, the limit straps didn't help. If you guys didn't catch it, we put limit straps on this thing in hopes that, you know, that's how basically all of our other rigs get set up, is no sway bars and limit straps, and then we don't have any over droop extension axle issues. But that didn't fix it on the Talon. Maybe this still won't fix it, but we've seen a fair share of Talons get beat down hard with stock axles, but they had a sway bar in the back and not break any rear axles. So that is most likely our issue. So as you'll see, throwing some rear axles in this thing, and then we'll move on to the next thing. driver side's all back together. Just threw in a new to us OEM rear axle in hopes that that gets rid of some of the gnarly clicking that was going on. We think it was just overextended axles. So gotta do the same thing on the passenger side. I'm not gonna film that. I'm just gonna rip that apart, pull the axle out, throw a new one in, and then we're on to the next item for the Talon.
Well, the question is it done clicking?
We shall see.
Oh no! Turns out, still clicks.
So these are used axles, but I almost feel like it feels like it's underneath me, like the drive shaft U-joint, which I know is a massive like complaint and issue on the Talon. So yeah, we're waiting on a drive shaft from Aaron Early at 2-Track Fab to put in this thing. So shout out to him. He's like the only, he's the only person out there making drive shafts for these things, just for, I think, issues like this. So I'm gonna take it around the yard and see if it truly is still clanking, and if it is, then I would assume that means it's the drive shaft. I don't think it would be that many axles clanking. It's got to be something else at that point. Hopefully it's not in the trans, but it's been doing it for so long that I would assume it's like a U-joint or something, which is very common. That's what people say. So, bummer.
No, it seems better, but yeah, it definitely seems better. Not completely fixed. Just buy the new tow rig though. Got rid of that old F350 lumber wagon. Got me this nice power boost here. So we'll see how the 3.5 EcoBoost does towing that big load.
It definitely still does it, but it doesn't seem like it does it as dramatic. So, I mean, maybe it is the axles. I don't know. Who really knows, I guess. Those last ones weren't broke. I mean, these ones are in to stay. So we've got a sway bar on now, as I mentioned. And I guess we'll just see how they hang together and Windrock. We'll catch back up with you guys if we get any more parts in time before Windrock for this thing. And that'll be in this video. So that'll be following this. Alright guys, so we got the Talon back in the shop here. Got it thrown up on the lift. We are now going to adjust the ride height like we talked about. So I'll throw in a quick how-to. I know most of you guys probably know how. But if you don't, this could be definitely some very useful information. So when you look at a shock that hasn't been, so I started doing it already, I'll say that much. When you look at a shock that you haven't touched yet, it's gonna look like this. You're gonna have two lock nuts right there. You can see you'll have this one, you have this top one, and this bottom one. On the top of your spring, you basically just crack this one loose, just crack the top one loose, and then at full droop, so it's on the lift here, at full droop you can then usually just spin this spring by hand, and you'll watch the bottom nut thread down away from the top nut. And then as long as you don't move the top nut, you'll just measure off of that, measure between the two nuts, and then set both sides the same. So for me, that's the driver's side. So then I'll adjust the passenger side the same amount. I've already done this one a little bit. So then you'll get to a point there, if you're doing a lot, where you can no longer really spin the shock by hand. It gets really hard because then you're putting pressure and you're fighting. As you thread that down, you're fighting the spring, and then you'll get to a point where you're hitting, you know, the pressure. So you can't really do it by hand. And you could take a hammer and a screwdriver or a chisel or something, or they make spanner wrenches, but the spanner wrenches in some spots are really hard to get up in there. And then you just tap this, just thread this down a little bit more. So as of now, we've got 1.25 inches that we've lowered the spring. Now I must say, when you do this, you're tightening, putting more tension on the spring. So in theory, it should ride a little worse. How much worse, I don't really know. We've adjusted all our machines this way, and I've never really seen any major issues or major downsides from it. My Can-am, I'm running about 16 inches of ground clearance, stock springs. They sag over time, everybody knows that, and I've just bumped it up, and I've rode 16, and everybody that rides in that thing says it rides great, including myself. I have no complaints. Could it ride a little better with different springs? Probably, but I think it rides great the way it is, so why fix something that ain't broke, you know? But anyways, just wanted to give you guys a little tip there. I'm going 1.25 inches between those two nuts. I'm moving it down 1.25 inches, and we're gonna see what that nets us in the front for lift. It's not like inch for inch, so like an inch of lock nut spacing will be about probably 2 inches roughly of actual ground clearance, but we'll see in the end. So once you spin that spring down to where there's too much tension to spring it by hand, this is the way I do it. I'll throw a ratchet strap, hook it onto the farthest coil I can, closest to the nut, and then just wrap it around like your A-arm or something solid down there, and then just ratchet and pull down on it. As you can see, it's pulling the spring away from that nut, which is then relieving some of the pressure off of that collar. I do want to say, this is definitely an area in machines that I lack knowledge. I don't know much about shocks, so just keep that in mind. I'm just sharing with you guys the way that I do things, the way I get my ride heights close to where I want them. And I'm sure there's better methods or more right methods, but that's just your typical dude in the shop trying to do it yourself, not really knowing a whole lot. This is how I do it. It works for me. Just want to share with you guys. All right, so you guys seen how I did it. That's only once there isn't too much pressure to spin that spring by hand. Then I'll take a screwdriver and a hammer and just tap it the right direction. And that's about all there is to it. Then all I can say is make sure that you drop the rig down, get it fully settled by jumping on it or take it for a little ride, and just make sure it's fully settled and back at like normal ride height before you go measuring for your final ground clearance. Got it back down on the ground, jumped on it a bunch of times. You can basically tell now it's at its final point. You push on the machine a bunch, you can tell it springs back to the same point every time. Measured the ground clearance, we got 14 now. So we went from 11.5 to 14, and we moved the collar 1.25 inches. So put 1.25 inch spacing between the two collars, lock nuts, whatever you want to call it, and we gained about 2.5 inches. So it's basically, like I said, you basically double the amount between that you move the collars, and that's about how much ground clearance you'll gain. I moved it 1.25 inches, I got 2.5 inches, so forth. There's pretty much tension between, like on the lock nut now for hitting it with a hammer and a screwdriver. Can't turn it by hand, obviously. So I'll probably just roll with that. If I was to suck it down anymore, it would ride like a complete pogo spring and be super stiff with these springs. But I think it looks much better already. It's not like hanging in the weeds anymore. Super nose down. The rear was 14.5. I haven't adjusted the rear yet. I'll probably adjust the rear just a little bit and just get it a little bit higher in the rear, but I don't want it to look super nose down like it did before. So hope this helped you guys. I'm gonna adjust the rear and see what we gain there. All right, Josh, what do you got?
Something from Aaron Early, 2-track Fab. I think it's a drive shaft. I guess we'll see what's in here.
I think there's some surprises to be had inside of here. He's kind of a jokester, but he's the only one out making drive shafts for the Talon, so shout out to him. It's the only fix to the rattling drive shaft on the Talon, the bad U-joints, and it's definitely a major weak point. We've seen literally 2 drive shafts fail with like 2 out of 3 or 4 Talons we've ridden with. A 4-seater and a 2-seater, so definitely cool to see companies stepping up like him, and he's just a construction guy in the trades like us who's making making some badass parts, so that's super rad. But let's see what we got.
Show the people what you have on your shirt. Who's on your shirt? Who's this?
No.
Oh, sassy. Bye.
Pro mower. Blown budget. Spicy. Hit it harder. I'm sponsored. Justin is fast, Josh is slow.
Oh, got you.
Hey,
2-track Fab right there.
the Polaris is broke. Pans over to the Polaris.
He's not wrong. What other goodies we got on here?
Thought it would be bigger.
That's, I mean,
A smiley face. You know, I'm pretty upset that you mixed this up, man.
spicy boys.
You're supposed to read it like I'm an island boy.
Didn't they get shot or no? Mower racing team? Spicy boys, I like that one. That's awesome. But on a real note, the thing looks beef. Some quality stuff. Literally all made in USA. He welds the stuff up himself. He's a fitter by trade, I believe. Don't hold me to the fitter, but I know he's in the trades.
He's a grinder.
Yeah. Super cool. But get this thing thrown in, hopefully. Hopefully it's not too much of an issue. Kind of running into a crunch time before we head to Windrock. So we're gonna get to it. All right, guys, we're gonna get to throwing this 2-track Fab drive shaft into Talon. I'm not 100% sure on this method. I've never pulled the drive shaft. So the last time we pulled the drive shaft was when we rebuilt the front end of this thing. So the whole front end was tore apart. We pulled it off. We tacked the caps on the U-joints of the stock drive shaft, because I guess those caps waller out and get thrown out. So that was what we did at the time of rebuilding this rig. But now that it's all back together, I'm not entirely sure the best method to pull the shaft out. I'm gonna try pulling these diff bolts out and seeing if I can just slide the diff forward, leaving all of this attached. I mean, the theory's there. We'll see if it works. I know the Talon does not have a carrier bearing. It just slides on the trans in the back, and there's like a weird clip that clips it into the front of the diff. So we'll see how it goes. I'm hopeful that we can just pull the diff forward and disconnect the drive shaft and then kind of get it out that way, but we'll see. All right, well, things escalated, but I wanted to give you guys a clip of this. Diff oil looking pretty good overall. Got a little bit of flake in it, but I mean, that's pretty normal. This was a brand new diff when we rebuilt this thing just from the crash. But it's seen some abuse so far, and it's working good. But anyways, update on tearing this thing apart. As you can see, things escalated. I ended up pulling each corner apart, pulling the axles out because I couldn't get the diff forward with the axles and stuff connected. I still can't get the diff forward. I don't know if it's just due to like our brackets. So if you guys haven't been following the channel that long or you're new here, this thing was wrecked at an auction. The whole front end was caved in. We rebuilt the front frame, diff mounts, all kinds of stuff. All of that stuff looks great for anybody who's wondering. This is the first time I've torn it back apart since then. But everything looks great up front. I don't know if the diff won't come out just because our tolerances are tight on these brackets, but as you can see here, it's not being pinched or anything. So my only other theory at this point is maybe the drive shaft is hitting, it's got like a drive shaft loop. You can kind of see there. If the drive shaft breaks, it doesn't go through the floor is the theory. But at this point, I'm basically just gonna commit to try and pull the diff. So I'm draining the fluid out now. The drive shaft is held on by this little clip here. You can kind of maybe see right at the end of my finger there. There's one there and one there. You spread it apart, and then the diff pulls off the drive shaft. Unfortunately, it's kind of difficult by myself. Maybe I didn't have to do as much if I had a second hand, but nobody's here to help me right now, so trying it solo. But I think I'm gonna have to have somebody spread that clip apart as I pull the diff forward, and then I think it'll come out, because it doesn't seem like it's bound up on anything. But just a little bit of an update there. Just thrashing this thing apart. It is the weekend before we leave for Windrock, so we leave in just a couple days. As you can see, Josh's Turbo S is slowly but surely coming back together. Got the new trans in that thing. Check out that video if you guys want to see the carnage on what happened to his. Alright, well, got the piece of junk out. Ended up pulling the driver's side floor apart. I'll show you guys in a little bit with a light. But here's the old, guess I should put it this way. There's the old, there's the new. It's the you versus the guy she told you not to worry about. Classic meme. But anyways, Josh stopped by, helped me get the stupid little clip off to push the drive shaft back off the diff. It's that clip they like separate, and they put pressure on it that way. Pretty stupid little design, honestly. But with two guys, we got it off, and then he had to run, so I ended up pulling a couple of these clips out of here of this inner footwell, and then you could peel this back, and we had to unbolt the drive shaft loop, which bolts right in there. I was able to get the passenger side from the passenger side of the machine, just over here. It's right in there, is where it sits, right on the other side of those coolant hoses. Anyways, the drive shaft doesn't fit through it, so you gotta take the bolt out and separate it and get the new one in that way. So yeah, now we gotta put it all back together. Update on this machine over here. We're filming two videos at one time, one about the Turbo S and that nightmare, one about the Talon and this, I guess I'd call it preventative upgrades to a certain extent. Anyways, we got the new drive shaft in. Just want to give you guys a little tip trick that Aaron gave us. That was
pro tip.
Definitely a pro tip.
Definitely pro tip.
Super helpful. The stupid little clip. Well, they don't have the clip, but
anyway, the clip sits in this groove right here. You can see the neck downs right there. Clip rides there. If you put the clip on down here and then kind of slide the drive shaft in, then it'll be able to spread the clip in, and trust me when I say this, it just fell right in versus us struggling before.
So yeah, spread the clip into the groove on the diff and just use the drive shaft as like a carrier to get the clip into the right location, and make sure when you spread the clip it's spreading into the groove. And then so the way we did it was we had this whole thing unbolted. I think you guys saw we had it pulled forward, so we were able to get to the clip a little easier, and we just pushed the drive shaft in from the inside of the rig, where we ended up taking this apart in order to get the drive shaft loop on the back and the front. So there's two drive shaft loops. We had to take both of them off to get the drive shaft to slide through them, because the new U-joints are too big. But then once you get that apart, you know, to put it back together, you were able to slide the drive shaft in, one guy, and then it all worked. Then the diff was put together. Oh, can't be peeking. Then the diff was put together, and then we slid the whole diff back and slid it onto the trans at the same time. Just a quick tease. We're not 100% sure if that's gonna happen. If it does, it'll probably be in the end of this video, so stay tuned to see if those get put on, if you've seen them.
Might just make it in the next video.
Yeah.
Or the one after that.
Who knows?
Who knows which order these are in.
But anyways, the drive shaft looks beef. It is in. When you know that tip, it goes a lot better. We were struggling quite a bit before that, but it's just difficult. I don't know. It's just a stupid design with the way the clip is that Honda uses, instead of like a bolt like that one and that one.
Or a roll pin.
Yeah, a roll pin that people bolt. I mean, I would have chose a roll pin over that at that point, because we struggled getting that clip out also. So anyways, got the diff bolted back in. Just got to get all the sensors plugged back in. Got to get the drive shaft loops bolted back on, and then just thrash these axles and everything back together in this whole area here, and we should be done with the drive shaft. One more thing I wanted to mention before I slap this thing back together was the rear drive shaft hoop goes here. This is the panel I pulled off to get to it, and the front one is up there. It is a pain in the ass to get this bolt out without taking all this stuff apart, which would probably be worth their time, but I was so far deep into trying to do it without it that I was like, nah, I'm not gonna. But that front one, you don't put this bottom like spacer back on. You just run the loop part, because the new drive shaft is bigger, so you need the extra space without that, and ours clears just barely, but ours was kind of tweaked from the rack too. So just wanted to note that before I start slapping the interior back together. Well, that's a wrap on the Talon video. We, as you can see, got everything loaded up here. Last minute per usual. We got some goods strapped to the trailer, but you'll just kind of have to see that in the next video. So we'll just throw that stuff on in the next video. We're trying to hit the road and beat the Chicago rush hour traffic. So stay tuned for the next video, guys. We're headed to Windrock. We'll see you there.